Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to this very special edition of the Hare Krishnas in Britain podcast. This is episode number 60. We finally made it to number 60, despite many attempts for the podcast to be struck off air all that time ago. We have made it to episode number 60. Thank you to everyone who's been part of the journey since we launched the podcast 2 years ago. This is another special edition because we're talking about a subject which is really important. We need to talk about more often, and I'm delighted to welcome our guest, Palika, Devi, dasi. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. It's Palika.
Palika. Palika. It's my terrible accent. And you're joining us this week all the way from Australia.
I'm in Bendigo, Victoria.
Wow. And
Yes.
It's terrible because I don't know which city she's from, but my sister-in-law is Australian. But I've ignorantly never asked her which city because her and my brother live in Dubai. So I've never been to Australia yet because I just visit them in Dubai, which isn't such a long flight. So we've got a lot to go through in this podcast, a really important conversation that we need to kind of go over, and I'm really grateful that you've joined us and you've been willing to be a guest. We've been connected on social media for some time, and I know I've maybe asked you a few times to appear as a guest, and I'm really pleased that you've kind of finally been willing to do it, and our guests will find out why soon. So let's kick off with the first question. Tell us a bit about you and where you're from.
So I'm 39 years old now. I was born in Christchurch and then moved to Melbourne Temple at 8 months of age, where it really kicks off. So in Melbourne Temple was kind of like the beginning of the end of Bhavananda, Vishnupad. So my father and mother, my father is Jagadatma, and my mother is a disciple of Bhavananda. Her name is Sachimata. My father's a Ritvic disciple of Srila Prabhupada, who never met Srila Prabhupada, but was given his name, and Bhavananda officiated his initiation. He had two opportunities to meet Srila Prabhupada, but he was sent away to other temples or allocated to stay behind rather than going to see Prabhupada. I'm unsure whether this was on the order of Bhavananda. It was never very clear why Bhavananda had done that, to ensure that my father never met Srila Prabhupada.
So your father joined ISKCON before 1977?
He joined not quite 2 years before Prabhupada passed away. He joined at 18 years of age and received initiation after 6 months from Prabhupada, and through Ritvic, initiation from Bhavananda. So Prabhupada gave him his name. I'm unsure whether he chanted on his japa, mala. And then, the zonal acharya system was instituted, and Bhavananda was obviously already allocated to Australia and New Zealand. My father was never an important disciple of Bhavananda. He was allocated as a cook for Govindas, for Gopals, and he was also allocated as a private hitman for Bhavananda. So where they all got allocated external duties, and then they got the other side where Bhavananda gave you your special orders. So Bhavananda ordered my parents to have 11 children. My father was working as a pujari, unpaid, full-time, and then working at Gopal's for $100 a week. And my mum already had a child when she joined. And then he ordered 11 children. So 10 more.
And did your parents have 11 children?
Well, they were under the impression that they were not allowed to disagree with their spiritual master and proceeded to have those 11 children. And my mother stopped at 5. So where she had 4 more, then Bhavananda fell down officially fell down. So then she stopped having children. She was unable to care for any of those children. She was out on the pick and sankirtan, as they call it, as in lying and cheating and deceiving people to get money for Bhavananda. And before Bhavananda was stripped of his role as the zonal acharya, I had sex with him in Prabhupada's room. So Prabhupada has his quarters in Melbourne Temple. So I was 3 years old. The first times I remember having sex with Bhavananda in Prabhupada's room. I had sex in the temple room with Bhavananda one time, which was very, very, those memories are not great. So Radha Vallabha, the deities in Melbourne Temple, very special to me. And Prabhupada's room, so I signed my marriage vows in that room. Prabhupada's quarters are very, very special to me. And I will not let Bhavananda, that memory of him raping me in Melbourne Temple as a 3-year-old and 4-year-old, take away from. So when I was 4, Bhavananda had already been stripped of all privileges at the temple and had lost his position.
So this was around 1988.
Yes, spot on.
It's only because you mentioned your age, and earlier on I looked up your date of birth on Facebook, which is the same year I was born, by the way. So 1988, yeah.
I'm not sure of the year Bhavananda was stripped of his privileges. Whether it was 86 or 87. I remember by the time in North Sydney, when I was 5 years old, Bhavananda, I saw him there a number of times, and which was very fraught. I'll just go on to say, when I got to North Sydney at 5 years of age, I approached a number of devotees and begged for their help with Bhavananda. I was terrified of him, very, very scared. They did an investigation into the allegations I made that Bhavananda had raped me multiple times in Melbourne Temple. The investigation was not a positive experience as a 5-year-old. Many senior Australian devotees were present at that meeting, and they found that I was an unreliable witness as a 5-year-old and that my testimony didn't match the other devotees. So I testified that Ramai Swami had walked in on Bhavananda raping me in the front room at Melbourne Temple, and Ramai testified that he hadn't seen any such thing and could not recall any such thing. Bhavananda's personal servant had been present during those rapes, and he testified that he didn't know who I was and he had never seen Bhavananda hurt anybody or have sex with any children. There were a number of other senior Prabhupada disciples who testified that they'd never witnessed Bhavananda being acting inappropriate towards any children. or having sex with any children at all. And that experience really shook me. Gopal Krishna cornered me and threatened me during the proceedings and said he would end my family if I didn't withdraw the allegations. There were a couple of other devotees who had promised that they would get me justice. And then afterwards, I felt completely let down by them. And they're like, well, we did everything we could, but that's just how it goes. So that was my first real insight into ISKCON investigating allegations of severe sexual abuse by its leadership. Ramai Swami was then made the temple president of North Sydney. And the previous temple president, Jai Sheela, who had orchestrated the investigation and promised to help me, was stripped of his position and removed to New Zealand as a result of that investigation. So we were made to leave North Sydney and we went into hiding in Kersley for a short period of time, and then we got permission to move to New Govardhan. I was raped multiple times by random people my dad orchestrated and organized. And then the big, my dad doing the full, you're being chosen special, got to do this for the family. Where I had sex with Jayadvaita and Bhaktividyapurna. I had met Bhaktividyapurna already in North Sydney, and he had caned me and threatened me repeatedly because I'm autistic. So he gave me the full lowdown on not wetting the bed, following instructions, behaving myself. He caned me a number of times, threatened me. That was in North Sydney.
Can I just ask, is your father still alive?
He is. He lives in Manchester. So he is British, hence why I'm talking to you.
He's in Manchester in Britain.
Yes.
Okay.
So he's currently on a temporary ban from all British temples based on my testimony and based on previous ban in Australia 17 years ago, which all that testimony and witness from my siblings has disappeared. Yes.
Okay, and just so I understand, the viewers understand, so your father, when you were a child, your father was what word can I use? Trafficking you around ISKCON for the sexual
not
pleasure
just ISKCON, but I'm just talking about ISKCON, but he was involved in other pedophile groups.
So has your father? Okay, I've got it. So your father, yeah, okay. You've mentioned two names there, Jayadvaita and Bhaktividyapurna. How old were you at this point?
It was, I'm not sure of the month. I'm thinking September 1989. I'm pretty good with dates. I remember it always by festivals. So, which, is it Janmashtami? Is it Gurpanima? Is it Rath Yatra? Like, what festival's going on? I'm thinking it's September 1989. Bhaktividyapurna and Jayadvaita came to the Gurukul for a visit. So the reason I remember them so well is because they talked about their service. So one was in charge of Mayapur Gurukul, and one was in charge of editing Srila Prabhupada's books. And then they, spent an hour discussing their service to Srila Prabhupada. And that's how I know who they are.
I don't mean to get, I was just editing Prabhupada's books. You see what I've got here? I've got the 1972 edition. And one of the things I'm doing in the UK is I run an initiative called the Hare Krishna Project, and we're distributing this edition. We've distributed 300 copies over the last 2 weeks. to schools and
Wonderful.
businesses. So I shouldn't have chuckled when you mentioned that, but it's such a topical issue to distribute this is topic. This issue is very important. Okay,
I could
okay.
go further into Jayad Veda's editing. So my father did assist him on a lot of Guru Tattva. My dad's an expert on Ritvik Tattva, being an official Ritvik. So there's very few Ritvik disciples of Srila Prabhupada who never met Prabhupada. And my dad is a bona fide, genuine disciple of Srila Prabhupada. And so am I, Ritvik. And trying to explain to someone who has not had a Ritvik initiation and what that actually involves. I'm not particularly happy with ISKCON having inner secret dimension. It should be radically transparent of what an actual Ritvik initiation is, a real one. And there should be no secret about what that involves. And that's why, like, I haven't written extensively on I've tried to, but I don't even know how to find the words other than through like Srimad Bhagavatam. But it's like, how do you even explain the crazy ISKCON inner workings of why they justify pedophilia and Devi Dharma and all these other ridiculous ancient Vedic evil practices, that they're like, I just cannot for the life of me fathom how to write about it in a way that's not sensational. My first, so with Jayad Veda and Bhakti Vijayapurna, that was my first real taste of Devi Dharma. Bhavananda, when he raped me in Melbourne Temple, it was very traumatic, but I had the feeling that he was mentally very unstable. He talked to Prabhupada the whole time. He was quite agitated and frenetic, and I would say mentally unhinged and crazed. But he threatened me multiple times, but it's like I wasn't even present. He was talking to Prabhupada, the Prabhupada Murti, 90% of the time. I was an irrelevancy. He was talking to his wife. So I'm named after his wife. So he was talking to his ex-wife through me. And it was very, as a 3 and 4-year-old, very, very confusing. And especially his rambling to Srila Prabhupada, and the conversations that he had regarding Prabhupada, I found extremely disturbing. So he said that he'd had sex with Prabhupada. He'd had sex with other children with Prabhupada. So this is when I was 3 and 4, which I always found extremely upsetting. My dad wouldn't, I spoke to my father many times about whether it was true. Bhavananda had said that he'd killed the witnesses in Vrindavan, that this had occurred in Vrindavan, and that they had killed the witnesses to that under Prabhupada's orders. I did speak to my dad a number of times about that and whether it was true, and he said it was completely above his pay grade. He could never know that. That was something that he had no privy or knowledge to, or whether Bhavananda was unstable or whether it was true or not. But it always made me feel very uncomfortable. Other of the disciples, so I have written about that and felt like I took a week off Facebook to write about that, because I was so concerned and worried about even writing that Bhavananda had told me this as a child. Because I always used to confront every single guru and senior sannyasi leader and temple president of being autistic. I take my vows very, very seriously. My word is like everything. And I'm like, do you not care that you made that vow to Srila Prabhupada? He's your spiritual master. Does it not bother you that you are misrepresenting yourself as a spiritual master? Do you not care about your disciples? Does that not bother you? And so I asked that of every single person that I had sex with as a child, if I got the opportunity. Some of them I never got the opportunity. But that was, I used to have a whole set of questions that I would try and ask if I got the opportunity. And that was always like straight up of what would Prabhupada say if he saw you doing this and breaking your orders to Srila Prabhupada? Like, does it not bother you? So I didn't really, with Bhavananda, the part that like he wanted, they have this saying that you cannot lie in front of the deities. So, or commit any sinful activity in front of the deities. Hence why I was having sex. Bhavananda, I'm 90% sure, had already been stripped of his zonal acharya title of being an officiating guru. He was very angry at no longer being in charge of the people, and them trying to throw him out of ISKCON and out of the temples. And I don't know if it was to get back at Krishna, Prabhupada, because he was very angry. I don't remember any context of, like, he did call me his mini wife and talk to me as if I was his wife. But then with Bhakti Vijayapurna and Jayadvaita was extremely different. So I was prepped beforehand that I was chosen because of my experience with my father being trafficking me in North Sydney, where I'd had sex with many, many non-devotees by that point. My dad left ISKCON multiple times, back and forward, over a 6-month period after Bhavananda left. And he had told me that he'd killed 2 of his god brothers or disciples of Bhavananda on Bhavananda's order. And then there was another disciple / god brother who'd also received the same order, and then they had been ordered to kill each other. And my dad and him called it and said, no more, we're done. And then Bhavananda was in and out of our home, threatening my father a number of times. It was very, very stressful with him raping me, abusing me, yelling, a lot of threats in North Sydney. My dad was addicted to drugs, on meth and heroin, and then went, so like extreme Hare Krishna, then leaving Hare Krishna, extreme backwards and forwards. Then we went to New Govardhan and doing the extreme Hare Krishna on the outside. So we all had to go to Mangalati, but then behind closed doors, extremely violent, raping, abusive, torturing, all of the above, but externally, obsessed Hare Krishna. We're all at Mangalati, we're all chanting, japa, and, we're all pure devotees. So he prepped me in advance for Jayad Veda and Bhakti Vijayapurna, how lucky I was chosen, that I was going to go and ask them. So I'd already accepted Ritvik initiation from Srila Prabhupada as a either 4 or 5-year-old. So this is the part that I'm very unclear on how to explain. And I don't write about my spiritual experiences on Facebook other than to say, yes, I am an Uttamadhikari. Yes, I remember being in Goloka Vrindavan and Vaikuntha. Not a big deal. No, I'm not a good person. No, I'm not a Paramahansa. It's not that hard to get into Goloka Vrindavan at all. I've always been able to remember my past lives. Not a big deal. Not a good person. So when I was 4 or 5, I think I was just turned 5, I chanted my japa. I hadn't chanted japa before. I'd already met Prabhupada a number of times in the spiritual dimension as a child. Not a big deal. Being autistic, I sense reality very differently. Not so much now, but as a child, I did. And so my dad taught me how to chant japa, explained all Guru Tattva to me. As a 5-year-old, I chanted on his japa that Bhavananda had chanted on his behalf to initiate him from Srila Prabhupada. Chanted my japa, and then I met Srila Prabhupada afterwards in a spiritual vision. It was not good at all. I didn't connect with Srila Prabhupada at all, and I didn't agree with him at all. And I refused to accept him as my spiritual master. I'd already accepted my dad as my spiritual master. He said he was a Bhattanapradashika guru, and he wasn't qualified to be a mantra diksha guru. And I said, I'm sorry, I've already accepted you as my mantra diksha guru. Srila Prabhupada wasn't particularly happy with that. So long story short, got to New Govardhan, met with Srila Prabhupada again, who introduced me to Ramai Swami and said no. Then I met Indradumna Swami, said no again.
So roughly how old were you at this point when you met Indradumna Swami? How old were you?
5 years old.
Okay.
5. And then this is where I've met Indradumna Swami. I actually accepted Indradumna Swami at that point as my spiritual master, as my Diksha mantra spiritual master. And I was very happy to accept Indradumna Swami. Now as an adult looking back, I'm like, oh my God, completely inappropriate. The things that happened with Indradumna Swami are beyond messed up. Beyond messed up. I met him I met him in January of 1990. So that's jumping forward. So we Bhakti Vijayapurna and Jayad Veda, I had to ask them spiritual questions. So as a child, I was a very odd child, being autistic. I couldn't read or write. I had an intellectual disability from all the suffocations and strangulation that my dad used to do, and which he did right through up until I left at 14 years of age. Where was I?
I think January 1990.
Yeah, September 1989. So I only really understood the world through Prabhupada's books and through the pictures in Prabhupada's books. We weren't really allowed or given much opportunity to read other books or interact with other people besides other Gurukul children, but with the proviso that I was never allowed to talk to them except for answer yes or no and be respectful. But I had been given express orders that I was never to speak to anyone without permission or at all. So it was very fraught and anxiety provoking. With Jayad Vaida and Bhakti Vijayapurna, I had to ask them a spiritual question that I'd come up with myself, according to Bhagavad Gita and Krishna book. So I didn't really know much about Bhagavad Gita or Guru Tattva. My dad explained Guru Tattva very briefly. Like, I had a fairly good understanding of what a spiritual master is, but it didn't make any sense, like these different levels of Kanishta, Madhyam, Uttam, Adhikari. My dad is an Uttam Adhikari as well, and it's not what Hare Krishnas think. So there can be really actually wonderful Uttam Adhikaris, and then you've got the Kamsa, Ravan, Tattva, who my dad actually seeks to be, where they go out of their way to be Kamsa, Ravan, Hiranyakashipu in Krishna's pastimes. And yep, I know, like, who in their right mind would want to be Hiranyakashipu in Krishna's pastimes here and now? My father certainly did. And he accepts, as myself, I accept all 12 unlimited rasas with Krishna, and I accept the role of the enemy of Krishna when Krishna is being the biggest demon. My father wanted to be Jai and Vijay being the biggest demon. The point being, Jayad Vaida, Bhakti Vijayapurna, I don't even remember the questions I asked them. I have no idea. I remember Bhakti Vijayapurna, I did not like his response at all. And I determined that he was not even a Kanishta Adhikari, and completely, and then I had to give my assessment on whether they were spiritually elevated. Jayad Vaida, I determined he was a Madhyam Adhikari. And he answered fairly okay, but not with any, because I had to explain what level of spiritual advancement they had, and whether I would accept them as my spiritual master. And then I had to do this ridiculous little marriage, where I put a garland on them. I had to do some service. So I remember massaging Bhakti Vijayapurna's leg. Just gives me the creeps. It was disgusting. Fold some clothes. And then we had this ridiculous, putting a garland over. Makes me want to chuck even thinking about and then the kumkum and the bindi. He was horrible, absolutely evil, caned me, beat me, had sex with him, was just evil. Jayad Vaida did the good cop, bad cop routine. Jayad Vaida saving me and telling Bhakti Vijayapurna off for being so nasty and evil, and there's no need to hurt me. I hadn't done anything wrong. Leave her alone. I was bawling my eyes out, and then Jayad Vaida's like consoling me. Had sex with Jayad Vaida. His female secretary, I don't think she was his disciple of someone else, was his assistant. She was present. I did speak to her a fair bit. Jayad Vaida was very kind, showed me his deities, didn't hit me, spoke to me for a good half an hour about Krishna consciousness. I spoke to him about why he was doing what he was doing. So I asked lots of questions all the time, and to understand why it is that he was doing what he's doing. And his justification for that behavior, I spoke to his secretary as well, of why it is that she was serving him, and did it not bother him that he was not following the vows of his spiritual master as a sannyasi guru. So their justifications are so poor that Bhakti Vijayapurna had no justification. He just felt like it. Sorry, that's Bhakti Vijayapurna. Jayad Veda said it was outside of his control. It's what the price of doing business is. He just tried to make the process as kind as possible. Photos were taken both times. There were witnesses and people watching. Aniruddha, the temple president in Melbourne, was one of those witnesses. There were other devotees present who came in or were outside to make sure that it had been done. Yeah, so
Okay.
My local temple president, Aniruddha, was one of the photographers. I had sex with Bhakti Vijayapurna in the sauna, and he came in and checked that I was doing what I was doing and taking photos. I don't remember. Aniruddha was not mean or cruel. Achincha Rupa was present, his wife, and gave me prasad in between. She was kind. She said it'll all be over and done with soon enough. It was not a good situation. I was so tired by the end, and I just wanted to get out of there. That wasn't the last time. So then Indradyumna came. I told Indradyumna about what happened with Bhakti Vijayapurna, Bhavananda, and Jayadvaita. He took notes in a black book, wrote notes about everything, had my dad called. My dad never denied any of it. Indradyumna was very kind. He said, like, I begged and pleaded with him that my dad was going to sexually abuse my sister, and I couldn't live with that, my stepsister. And he said he would do what he could. He did a blessing, did a prayer. Then it got really weird. I got selected for a special visit with Indradyumna Swami and some other children. There was not many there. I think there was 2 other children, and we had a satanic, I don't even know, he was in his 30s, very skinny, doing Satan rituals while we all got to watch. And while he was cutting his hand and chanting, like, and doing stuff on the ground, Indradyumna was smiling the whole time and chanting japa and praying. And he got us all to pray and chant, and we all had to chant Nisringadev prayers and chant Hare Krishna and pray to Krishna to remove all evil. So we were doing all of these prayers and chanting while they did this, not Indradyumna Swami, but this other dude, no idea, Satan worshipper, was doing his rituals. That was my first Hare Krishna Satan experience. I had been involved in satanic rituals in North Sydney, but that was not part of the Hare Krishna movement. So that was my first Satan. Didn't really generally have any of that. So I think there was one time in Bhubaneswara, or maybe twice, where we had a Satan worshipper come and, twice that I can recall, Satan worshipper come and do their whatever it is that they do with cutting their hand. And so my dad used to do all of that stuff all the time, cutting his hand, doing blood where we had to do promise and vow on Krishna's lotus feet, was hope to die. That was a, weekly occurrence. Had to cut our hands and promise that we would never turn on him and his, god brothers. That was Indradumna Maharaj. I still loved Indradumna Maharaj. I thought, as far as all the Prabhupada disciples, he was definitely the best of a bad bunch. Then I met Gaura Govinda Maharaj in, I think, April, maybe it was May of 1989. I'm not sure of the month. And they proceeded to do the same thing, except for it didn't go as planned with Gaura Govinda Maharaj. So they ended up beating him. He went into like a samadhi state, just like catatonic. There was a gun involved, threatening to kill me if he didn't comply. He was just like catatonic. They stripped off his clothes and posed me taking photos with him, and then it was all done. And then they just started chanting Hare Krishna, putting water on him. Then he came back. And my dad's like, oh, he's a pure devotee. He's an Uttamadhikari. We're going to take shelter of him because, yeah, he's the real deal. So my dad was completely hooked that Gaura Govinda was the real spiritual master, unlike Bhavananda and his god brothers that he'd met before. And soon after, long series of events, my dad's, serial killer, psychopath. Not going into those bits. I'm talking about the Hare Krishna stuff.
Has your father ever been convicted of anything?
Oh God, no. I've been to no, my dad is the master. Like, every time a devotee confronted him, he would do I'm so sinful, Prabhu. I try so hard. I've got 6 kids. I'm doing the best I can. Please bless me with Krishna's mercy. You do the 4 Vanchakalpas. Please forgive me for any and all offenses. And they'd be like, he'd be crying, saying, what a sinful person he is, Krishna. And then they'd go, oh, you're doing the best you can do. And it all would be forgiven. He's the master at it. My dad's convicted of nothing.
I was just going to ask, so tell us a bit about, if possible, some of those experiences in Bhubaneswar, because I think I read a bit of your kind of biography on Facebook. I think you went on to accept Gaura Govinda Maharaj as your guru, did you, at some point?
I did. So when he first came to New Govardhan, I actually bit him and kicked him in the nuts. I was so angry at him for not standing up to ISKCON authorities. I blamed him for letting this happen, and directly hold him still now and then responsible for what happened. And not speaking out about it publicly. His approach was tolerate and cooperate with ISKCON and try to fix it from the inside, and on the orders of his spiritual master. So we all shuffled off. I arrived in Bhubaneswar on Balaram's appearance day in 1990, and we were there for 5.5 till the end of 1996 in December. We left. So 5.5 years, odd years, with Gaura Govinda Maharaj. Gaura Govinda Maharaj was a very interesting character, very orthodox, Brahmin, extreme. My dad was a sycophant follower, of Gaura Govinda Maharaj, and I soon became one as well. I think I was 8 years old when I officially accepted him as my spiritual master. He didn't accept me as his official disciple till I was 10 years old. So, where he verbally in public accepted me as his disciple, and gave me instructions. So I think it's like a 6-month process for him to verbally accept me as his disciple. By the time I was 11, I was already chanting 16 rounds. I requested Diksha initiation when I turned 12. He refused multiple times to give me Diksha initiation, and said I wasn't qualified and it wasn't appropriate for me. And Krishna had said that I was not to take Diksha initiation. It wasn't my nature. I vehemently disagreed. And he said I was a crazy person, which I am, mentally ill, and that it wasn't suitable for me to take 16 rounds and 4 regulated principles. And I'm like, well, you don't have a right to deny me initiation, because it's ISKCON law that as long as you chant 16 rounds and follow the 4 regulated principles, you have to give me initiation or give me a good reason why I shouldn't have. Thankfully, he never actually gave me formal initiation. So, because I take those vows extremely seriously, and he was right the whole time in that regard. Yeah, Gaura Govinda Maharaj, so many crazy stories. Lot of 2-3 hour Srimad Bhagavatam classes, a lot of ecstatic pastimes. We were crazy, obsessed guru disciples.
Did so you were in Bhubaneswar, you stayed in Bhubaneswar for some time, did you, in the 90s?
Yes, 5.5 years.
5.5 years. And at any point did Gaura Govinda Maharaj act inappropriately towards you?
Yes. And there's a lot of things that I haven't written publicly about because they're just too ridiculous. Where I just go, how do you even start with that? Like, it's just that bonkers. Where I'm just like, oh, well, let's just leave that one. My dad was obsessed with trying to convert Gaura Govinda Maharaj into being a pedophile like him, and so I used to sneak into Gaura Govinda Maharaj's room the first 6 months that we were there when I lived in the guest house, and my dad threatening me and beating me that I needed to sneak into Gaura Govinda Maharaj's room and lay in his bed, and then my dad trying to take photos, and then jumping into Gaura Govinda Maharaj's bed with him and him removing me and telling me to get out. And my dad enjoyed toying with Gaura Govinda Maharaj. And then after 6 months, he said, oh no, we're done, we're good. Don't need to do that anymore. We've moved on from that. And he decided to really knuckle down on being a good shiksha, accepted Gaura Govinda Maharaj as his shiksha guru before we left India for a month or 2. But before we left, Jagadatma took re-initiation of Brahmin initiation from Gaura Govinda Maharaj and accepted him as his shiksha guru and retook his vows. And my stepmother took her re-initiation and received a new name, and she didn't take Brahmin at that point in time. My dad had no intention of actually following those vows. Neither did my stepmother, but they did have every intention of accepting Gauri Govind Maharaj as their spiritual master.
You
Gauri Govind,
mentioned, sorry, go ahead.
Gauri Govind Maharaj was a lot of the things that he did were very inappropriate, was in relation to gaslighting and victim blaming me. So I did ask for his help with my dad sexually abusing me multiple times, and he did endeavor to do everything he could. But how he went about it, as an adult, I do not appreciate what he did at all. So victim blaming me with, this material world, all suffering is here, get Krishna Prema, don't come back here, only suffering is here. He chastised my dad in public repeatedly, told my dad repeatedly to stop behaving like that. My dad, of course, went, of course, Gurudev, of course, I'm so sinful. Did the whole, I'm so sinful, please forgive me, Gurudev. He used to enjoy saying Gurudev all the time and following him around like a, lost puppy. Gauri Govind Maharaj did the full, Tattenu Kampam. That's why I write a lot of the spiritual things that they use to control me. So the Tattenu Kampam, Kunti Devi, all of these spiritual examples, that it's my karma, that I have done all these sinful activities in a previous life, and this is why this suffering is here, so I never forget Krishna. I just have to really surrender to Krishna and see it as Krishna's mercy. By the end, Gauri Govind Maharaj asked me if my dad had stopped molesting me, and I actually lied to Gauri Govind Maharaj, and I said he had, because I just couldn't. I was just like, what's the point? I've already told you so many times, I've begged you so many times. My dad's not listening. And every time I talk to you about it, more and more evil stuff just keeps happening as a result, with my dad beating me even more for telling Gauri Govind Maharaj, where I just had to let it go, that Gauri Govind Maharaj wasn't in a position to help me. So the temple president and his vice president was having sex with me as well. Gauri Govind Maharaj did know that, and he stood them down as his temple president and vice president for 1 month, while they got fixed up and followed the 4 regulated principles and promised and vowed that, they would now, and then they retook their vows and promised that they would not have sex with me again. Chaitanya Chandra did follow that. Advaita Charya, the vice president, now Gopinath Swami, continued to have sex with me till I was 12 years old and didn't follow those orders of his spiritual master. Chaitanya Chandra did. Where would I start? Bhuvaneshwar was horrific. I just kind of became obsessed with Krishna Prema and Sadhu Sangha to deal with the flashbacks, the PTSD, and the multiple rapes that were just like sporadic, lots of pack rapes with Bhakti Vijayapurna turning up, with Lokanath, Bhakti Charu, Radhanath, number of others. They did not take part. They supervised and watched while random sannyasi, they were not sannyasi at the time, they were brahmacharis or whatever the hell they were. They raped me, had their photo taken, and then they took their sannyas vows at a later date, or I saw them and then they were in their sannyasi, given their sannyasi names. This happened a number of times. at different locations around Bhubaneswar temple. Some of them I had sex with individually, dependent on how important they were, but predominantly it was just get it over and done with. So there wasn't a marriage ceremonies. So there was a few, but predominantly there was none of that. It was exchange a garland, pay obeisances, say your Guru Pranams. I had to chant japa and to chant the Shringadev prayers first, and then take the photo, have like, it was timed, like 1 minute photo, done, next 1 minute photo, next, done. And it was not great. There were other, they were the better ones. There was, my dad had this, I don't know, I don't think it was him, where it was very physically violent. Those incidents were far more traumatic for me. By the time I was 10, I lost my mind and fully, completely bought into it all. That was my service duty. So they had completely brainwashed me by the time I was 10 years old. I had lost all fight, all sense of reality. I just accepted whatever my dad told me and Gauragovinda Maharaj told me, whatever's in Srimad Bhagavatam. By that point, I had just, it's all true. I'm just going to accept it and pray to Krishna 24/7 and, get ready to leave my body. Was not in a good place. Where does that lead me to?
I mean, just to say, I believe you, by the way, and this is what your dad was doing is classic paedophile behavior, and the experiences that you went through. I have a friend here in the UK. She's not a devotee. She's about 30 now, and she was raped by her father at a young age, from I think from the age of 3, maybe even younger. Her mother then left this man, married another man, and the stepfather then raped her, carried on raping her in her teenage years. And I've talked to her a bit over the years about how has that affected you now and your mental health and how you perceive things. And she said up to the age of 24, she's 30 now, up to the age of 24, she thought that having sex with your parents and your brothers and sisters was just normal. She thought everyone was doing it. And it took a therapist after many years of therapy to explain, no, this is not normal behavior at all. You shouldn't be having sex with your family and with random people. It's only through hearing other people's stories that I completely believe you, and that she has now huge mental health difficulties. She's tried to take her own life so many times, and she has going off on a bit of a tangent now. She has a condition called DID, which is is it DID? It's the kind of different personality syndrome where she blocks out different things and experiences. And I might be having a conversation with her at the age of 30. And there was one occasion we were talking about something, and then all of a sudden she was this 15-year-old girl, and that she had changed personality. And then 10 minutes later, she'd gone back to her current self and she'd forgotten everything we'd spoken about. And I then...
That's a common response. It's very, very common. Yeah. So that's why I didn't want to come on the podcast until I was confident that I could talk about these things without having that response. And that I'd done enough therapy sessions to be able to talk about it without getting into regression, back into my childhood, where it's like you're transported back there and you're reliving it again. Now I've talked about it, I've written about it, I'm more confident that that's not going to happen without being as traumatized by the experience of talking about it.
Dissociative disorder, or is it dissociative identity disorder, or something like that?
Yes, it certainly is.
Just looking it up.
Yep.
Can we, kind of conscious of the time, I think you and I are probably I'd like to do another podcast at some point to talk about what ISKCON can do for the future. I think we do need to do 2 podcasts, maybe in a few weeks'
Yeah,
time.
the follow-up of the years of right through, I asked lots of senior devotees. So Anutama, Jayapataka. So I met Jayapataka at 8 years of age. So you know how I talk about, or just talked about, the multiple group rapes? Jayapataka was not present during these events. So Jayapataka came to Bhubaneswar many times. I approached him twice to talk about Bhavananda, Jayadvaita, and Bhaktivinoda Purna raping me, and begged for his help. The first time he said he would look into it. It wasn't his, didn't have the authority to remove them. And Bhavananda was already gone. There's nothing he could do about that, but the other 2 it wasn't up to him. The second time he said he would send somebody to investigate. He asked me to bless him that he would be able to follow Srila Prabhupada's instructions and uphold Prabhupada's mission. He blessed me with his stick. So he had this stick, and did his blessings, paying my obeisances, doing blessings. He did send somebody, I don't know the American devotee that came, and I think one was a British devotee. Rachitambara came. I talked to her. She said she didn't want to know about it. She said that Bhaktivinoda Purna was her friend. She had never seen anything like that. She couldn't here she had a conflict of interest. She didn't want to know. The other devotee, I can't recall her name. That was when 8 or 9. But that led to the avalanche of more and more people turning up for my dad, who had organized it. My dad did not like Jayapataka Maharaj. He had been his handler initially, and had to answer to Jayapataka Maharaj as his senior. So Gauravinda Maharaj had to answer to Jayapataka Maharaj. He was the GBC for Bhubaneswar. And my dad worked very closely with Prataparudra, who is the disciple of Jayapataka Maharaj and was in charge of Bhubaneswar BBT. And my dad was senior via initiation, but by the ISKCON order, he was far junior to Prataparudra, and he worked side by side with him for whatever it is that they did, far above my pay grade. With Prataparudra, I used to sit in on some of the meetings, and then I would go outside. I was a sycophant follower of my father and followed him around like a lost puppy, chanting Hare Krishna and praying for my dad's soul. I really bought into all of it, Narada. Narad. Is it Narada or Narad?
Narada. Narada. Yeah. Narada Das.
Narada. So I really bought into it and bought it hook, line, and sinker. And then by the time I was 10, I did used to argue with my dad a lot on scriptures and Shastra, and but most of the time it was just managing his severe anger and violence. There's lots of incidents, with the VIPs and all the other crazy stuff that, to fund the temples. So obviously was one of the virgin children offered to Radha Gopinath on the installation of Radha Gopinath temple with my sister and another British girl. So there's lots of beautiful incidents, that lot of beautiful, amazing things that I really just held on to right through my time in Bhubaneswar. And I just kind of fixated on Padayatra. I was obsessed with Padayatra, traveling. I went on All India Padayatra. One of Lokanath Maharaj's disciples molested me and my sister, and we ended up leaving for that reason. Did tell the authorities and they covered it up, sent us home. Another case there with Lokanath disciples. 10, the crisis meetings went to Mayapur. That was my first visit to Mayapur. Last minute begged and pleaded my dad to take me. And miracle, I got to go to Mayapur and attend and see the Pushpa Samadhi that had been paid for. So how fortunate I was to help contribute to the the building of Pushpa Samadhi by all that sex I'd had with all these men to help fund Prabhupada's Pushpa Samadhi. How blessed I was to contribute to that. That was their justification of, you need to contribute and pay your way, and no one gets to be in Prabhupada's movement without contributing, and you have to, contribute towards Prabhupada's mission. And then 2 days of meetings with my father, met Ambarish. I'd met Ambarish before, but not where I actually had a conversation with him. So he'd come to Bhubaneswar, but I was not important enough to speak to him. So from a distance, I had seen him, and everyone's, Ambarish, VIP. I'm like, I really don't care. Unless you're a pure devotee, I'm not interested. I was a bit of a snob, like, I'm only interested in the Uttamadhikaris, and I used to follow them around and complete bonkers. Not a good didn't have any people skills, to put it mildly. And I didn't have any friends besides Gunachuda, who's the temple president. Bhaktivedanta Manor Gurukul teacher. So she was my only true friend.
I know her. I know her.
So she saved me. I prayed for a good 2 years, non-stop, praying for a real spiritual master to turn up. And she turned up and took me under her wing, and I followed her around, decided I was her protector and guardian, and she tolerated me very kindly. And because before that I was extremely suicidal, and then Gunachuda turned up, and I decided it wasn't worth killing myself anymore because I had Gunachuda. So I had one friend, first ever friend in my life, and she's saved me. And I never felt truly comfortable to talk to her about any of these things because I was worried. Obviously my dad threatened to kill her if I ever told her anything. That was just a standard, you're either in or you're not in. And then I'm always terrified that if I told her, she would leave and then I would have no friend. So you're kind of torn between how do you, because I've disclosed to many devotees and the result has always been a complete disaster right through my childhood. And I couldn't risk losing my one and only true friend because all the others I disclosed to just went, that was the end of the friendship. That was the end of everything that I held dear. So I didn't want to lose Gunachuda. Where are we?
Do you still have contact with her now?
Yes. I saw her last when I went back to Bhubaneswar in, I think, 2002. We've kept contact over the years. Olwen, her sister, I saw her then last too, very, very close to Olwen. Met her mom and stepdad, I think twice or once. I still count her as my eternal best friend, spiritual master. If I ever go back to Goloka Vrindavan, which I have no intention of ever returning there, the only reason I would ever go back would be to see Gunachuda there. And so Padayatra is my life and soul. I'm always on Padayatra, even now. So when you enter into that spiritual dimension, you never actually leave. So your body might leave, but your spiritual nature and identity never leaves. So me and Gunachuda are eternally on Padayatra together, chanting Krishna's names and with our Gaunitai. So Lokanath owned those Gaunitai, and I prayed to those. He came to collect them in Bhubaneswara. And let's just say me and him did not see eye to eye on him removing my Gaunitai from me. So these are Padayatra Gaunitai, I call them Daru Chaitanya and Daru Nityananda. And I had a very intimate personal relationship with those Gaunitai, and Lokanath trying to remove them from me, I wanted him dead. Like for him to come in to Bhubaneswar and try to take my Padayatra Gaunitai from me. So I didn't talk to him. I hated him with a vengeance. Govind Maharaj forbid him to remove the Gaunitai, and said, go and ask Gaunitai if you're allowed to take them. The Pujari of Padayatra Gaunitai said I needed to come every morning for the Mangaladi and petition Gaunitai to not leave us and go with Lokanath. So I came almost every morning for Samsara Dava, prayed to Gaunitai, chanted my japa, begged them not to leave and go with Lokanath. And then they came and they carved a new set of Gaunitai, and Lokanath took them with him. That was, I didn't talk to Lokanath at that point in time. It was through the Pujari. And then it was like I had won against Lokanath. It was like one little win of, you don't get to take my Padayatra Gaunitai from me. They belong to me and you have no right to take them. Obviously they were his Gaunitai, but they refused to leave. And he took a different pair back with him. Lokanath, so we had the big Prabhupada Centennial celebrations. Bhubaneswar was obviously the first in January, being the last temple of Srila Prabhupada's established and put the foundation stone. So it is the 106th temple of Srila Prabhupada. And so extremely special for Bhubaneswara to be the last temple of Prabhupada. And so it was chosen as the first location based on that for Srila Prabhupada's pleasure. So the last to be the first. We organized a 10-day festival. My dad was the chairperson for the pleasure of Srila Prabhupada. Yeah. was terrible leader, but he did try.
Um,
Um,
I'm conscious of our time, my time particularly, and I really want at some point want to record a part two with you, because I really want to talk about in more detail later on about what's happening now in your life and your kind of campaign against child abuse, but um, and for greater child protection, if that's at all
yes,
possible in ISKCON.
yes.
But what I really appreciate today is you've over the last hour and a half, you've been sharing almost an hour and a half. You've been sharing so much about some of these really personal details about your childhood and your teenage years, which I really appreciate. And that you and I love the fact, maybe that's not the right use. I really um, uh, applaud you for speaking out. And your story for me fits with this kind of much bigger narrative that's coming out, um, uh, around paedophilia in ISKCON, which has horrified me. But I kind of want to metaphorically slap myself, because why should it surprise me? In so many different kind of movements, religious movements, this is a typical behavior in other groups like the Mormons, the Jehovah's Witnesses. Is this kind of we don't talk about sex publicly, but we do it a lot behind the scenes, and we do it massively inappropriately. So ISKCON therefore fits the mold, unfortunately, of other religious organizations that are kind of non-worldly, anti-establishment, that they deal with things behind closed doors. And unfortunately, we're seeing now ISKCON is no different from any of these other religious, non-worldly groups.
We're pretty much coming to the end of the tale. So, Prabhupada Centennial, Lokanath Maharaj is there so he's the head of Prabhupada Centennial movement for organizing it. And all the sannyasis, it's a big deal, huge deal. And one of the senior GBC children tells me about Lokanath molesting Satya. I'd already heard of it, obviously, but I didn't think it was a big deal at all. I'm like, so what? Like, and he's like, kind of is a big deal. That's illegal. And I'm like, it is? We've had the police out from India like heaps of times. Not a big deal. Like for me, that was like, why would they be concerned about him fondling a child? Like, I've had sex with all of these men. Like, I didn't say that, but I was like, what's the big deal? And he's like, well, it's not. Then they're, sanction him. I'm like, yeah, I was at that, meeting. Like, so what? And he's like, it's kind of like he shouldn't be a spiritual master if he's done that, and they've covered it up. And I was like, oh. And then I became incensed and really angry. We had to judge all of the pictures. So we had like coloring competitions and drawing competitions. So I was one of the judges. And I got so angry. And I did up a poster. I did my placard. I did my little mini protest chasing after the row of sannyasis, with Lokanath in tow, chanting, justice for Satya, Lokanath's a pedophile, and running up and down. I was like trembling all over. I was so scared, but I was just like, this is it. They'd already convinced me that I was sinful and deserved it. And I like, well, I don't deserve justice, but Satya does. And the other Gurukuli was like, if you do, I begged him to, can you please join in? And he's like, if you do this, I will never talk to you again. You've got a death wish. They're going to kill me and you. Don't do it. And of course, I was just like, I'm ready to die. Bit like now. Like every time I'm like, you sure? Yep, I'm good. And chasing after them. And as a result, my dad beat me severely, dragged me before Lokanath, and a number of other sannyasis. Gauri Maharaj was present, was made to apologize to Lokanath for my actions, I didn't really apologize. I said I was really, really angry, like really angry. I remember my words very clearly, and I'm so proud of them, where I just went, I'm really sorry you molested Satya and that you're a pedophile. And I'm sorry that you had me beaten. I was so defiant. Gauragovinda Maharaj chastised me and said that I had no right to behave like this. I wasn't acting appropriately. And I shouldn't behave like that. And I said, well, who is speaking for Satya and myself being molested? And he's like, oh, I leave it to the authorities. It's not your place to speak out. And I retorted, well, which leader is going to speak out for me? All of you are responsible. There was a number of sannyasis present. Then Gauravinda Maharaj told Lokanath off, and it got very, very heated between the two of them. And then Gauravinda Maharaj just started talking to Srila Prabhupada, begging Prabhupada to forgive him for all his offenses, that he couldn't protect me. Then Lokanath demanded that I leave. And it was a little tiny victory, short-lived. One of Lokanath's disciples came, banged on my door a number of times, screamed that he was going to kill me and my whole family, demanded my birth date. And then Gauragovinda Maharaj passed away about 3 weeks later on my birthday. Before he passed away, Anuradha and Jagat, my parents, said that Gauragovinda Maharaj was going to be killed as a result of my actions towards Lokanath. Chaitanya Chandra and Advaita Acharya said so as well, that it was on me, that my actions would cause Gauragovinda Maharaj to be removed. Gauragovinda Maharaj already said multiple times that the GBC and his godbrothers would poison him and would have him killed and removed. And sure enough, passed away on my birthday. Saw them discussing it afterwards. Chaitanya Chandra is like, don't worry about it. It's not your fault. None of this happened because of you. It's just, how it is. And that was pretty much the end of ISKCON men having sex with me. After that, I still was trafficked to other people, but not necessarily sannyasis and gurus. So the taking photos of ISKCON leaders or whatever they are, temple presidents, and having their photo taken, that finished. So then it was a couple of VIPs that my dad had lined up. Not that they were ISKCON devotees as far as I could tell. So obviously Chaitanya Chandra is well aware of it. And they had lots of arguments with my dad. So Chaitanya Chandra didn't authorize or approve of my dad trafficking me, except for when he agreed to it. And when it was organized by Chaitanya Chandra, and that it was a mutual beneficial between all of them. And then when we came back to Australia, there was a meeting. Devotees came to meet my father a number of times to make sure that all of it was hushed up and was never to be discussed again. When I left for New Govardhan, I promised and vowed on Krishna's lotus feet I would never tell anyone, and would put it all behind us, and my dad would let me go, and I'd go join the temple, and We never need to talk about any of it again, and we're going to whitewash everything, and everything's going to be wonderful. And I went and told Indradyumna Swami as soon as I got there, not about me, but that my dad had molested my sister, because I didn't promise and vow I'd never tell anything about her. So there's no reason that I couldn't talk about her. Because, you know, I've got to be truthful. I can't break my vows on Krishna's lotus feet. But I never promised not to talk about Priya, my younger sister. So I told Indradyumna Swami, he did some prayers, he asked after Priya, and she still hasn't forgiven me for asking Indradyumna Swami to please help me. Even now, she still hasn't forgiven me for that. Then when I was 19, Ajita, I told when I was 16, did a statement, a formal statement that he'd abused my sister. Then at 19, I did a formal statement with Anutama that my dad had sexually abused my sister and my older sister as well. And by then I'd completely blocked out everything that happened to me. By the time I was 19, I had flashbacks a number of times and just went, oh my God, complete meltdown, pack that up, not up to dealing with that. And I just became fixated on getting justice for my younger sister, and I didn't feel like I deserved any justice for myself. I bought hook, line, and sinker that it was my karma, I was sinful, never want to think about it again. I've done my time. Now I just pray to Krishna, do karma yoga, and we move on. Fast forward to 2 years ago. My sister and I are talking for like 3 hours about our childhood and my father and my stepmother. And then the next day, it all just came flooding back. And then I reached out to my sisters straight away, confirmed everything. And it just went from there. I literally thought I did lose my mind. I ended up in the psych ward twice. It was just so horrific. I just could not accept what happened. I was just beside myself. I could not function. And my siblings supported me so much, and then it got too much for them. And yeah, they're quite because they had very different experiences than me, and also very triggering for their experience. My experience with my dad is very different than theirs. So he sexually molested a number of children, but as far as the taking photographs and having sex with GBC temple residents, I'm not aware of my siblings engaging in that behavior, because my dad didn't trust them. I was a sycophant follower. Mind you, I used to tell people all the time that my dad was, you know, abusive, and try and get support, and then that would go nowhere and I'd give up. But and then my siblings, some of them did try and speak out and go, well, no one's doing anything, nobody cares, why bother, we just cop a massive beating as a result. And they come and talk to my father, and then we get an extra beating on top. And I reached out to my dad straight away to tell him that I remembered everything. He'd actually called me a number of times over the years. So I was in the psych ward twice prior to this, with medication the first time, and he called me to say, you're not remembering everything that happened, did you? And I'm like, what are you talking about? No. And then the second time with postnatal depression, he called me straight away and he says, you're not starting to remember stuff, are you? And I'm like, what are you talking about? No, I've got postnatal depression. He's like, good, you better not be making up stuff. You know, we put this all behind us now. So we reached out to him again, told him I remembered all of this stuff, and he immediately said, I'm really concerned for your mental health. Is your sister's making you say all of this? I'm like, nope, haven't even checked in with them. And then he's like, did this abuse happen here? Was it in this place? You know, you had a speech impediment, don't you know? And I'm like, yep, I certainly did. And then it was just very, very clear to me from how he was writing that he knew exactly what I was talking about. And the fact he was asking, did the abuse happen in this house? Was it in that house? Which place was the abuse taking part in? I'm like, I wished him well, sent him his favorite sloka, which is Sarvasya Chaham Riddhisani Vishto. Told him I still loved him, which I do. But the answer is no. I'm not going to keep those vows that I made to you, you know, a million times. You know, where I had to cut my hand and promise and vow and, you know, do all of these rituals that I was never to tell anybody. I'm like, no, I don't owe you silence. I don't owe you anything. I wish you all the best. And I pray that you develop some conscience, integrity, kindness. But I spoke to my psychologist repeatedly, you know, like going, am I sane? Like, this is so ridiculously crazy. Is it possible? You know, and they're like, no, you're very sane. You've got post-traumatic stress disorder. And I'm like, sure, it's not psychosis. And they're like, no, definitely not. And checking with all my siblings, that yes, they have different memories, but yep, their memories match mine of horrific physical and sexual abuse at the hands of my father. And that gave me the confidence to go, okay, this is real. I'm not the only one. I've always known that he molested my older and younger sister, but then, you know, it's not just me and my others, like all four of us girls. There are others that I'm aware of. And I feel confident that speaking out about it, I don't wish any, like, I get very upset with my family members or other devotees going, oh, they're going to go to hell and they're going to cop it just as bad. I'm like, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. And I find it very disturbing that devotees have no compassion or kindness and want violence and abuse, and, you know, like advocating that, you know, people hurt them. Or I'm like, no, how about we just start with the truth and kindness that we never received. And I advocate for go to the police, which I did. Contact the Child Protection Office, which hasn't been that great. Hence why I moved to the next step of engaging with Slater and Gordon to apply for the National Redress Scheme, and then where they've advocated that no, ISKCON needs to be held to account at a higher level than that. And then I've decided to publicly speak about what's happened in regards to supporting others who may have had the same experience as me, so that they can come forward and feel confident in their testimony that they're not alone. I'm not after revenge, retribution of any kind at all. I find it very distasteful. Yeah, not interested. I would like to see ISKCON do a proper investigation and get all the previous testimonies that I did right through my childhood and speak to all those devotees who I did approach right through my childhood and ask for help. And obviously, with, you know, based on my testimony, is not going to be sufficient. But if there is a lot of other children who have had similar experiences, and they can be taken in their entirety, where, you know, there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, however many children have come forward to say this happened to me, and the Child Protection Office has got a number of us stating what happened, what the rituals were, why they were done. So I was told that it wasn't about ISKCON, and ISKCON didn't have a choice. And, you know, it was above their pay grade. And I did watch devotees being beaten by people outside of ISKCON repeatedly. So anyone who tried to refuse was beaten. And I did watch a number of devotees face worse than that when they refused to comply, and they were not ISKCON enforcers. Who those photos went to ultimately, I am unaware. I only saw a number of people who came to our home and over the years, so met them many times over the years. They were not Hare Krishnas, who my dad reported to, and Chaitanya Chandra. They were not ISKCON authorities. Whatever the case is, I really don't care that predominantly ISKCON was not technically responsible for what happened to me, and they were just following orders. So I remember Jayadvaita discussing that without engaging in this, they couldn't keep their charitable status, that they needed to do this in order to someone in government to sign off and tick on government funding and projects. And this was the price of getting government approval and funding, was they had to do this and have their photo taken, and then it would be handed on to someone in government who would then pull the strings, and it was just part of, you know, whatever it is they do. I really don't care. What I do care about is children in ISKCON being used as pawns, so that you can get government funding or government approval or whatever it is irrelevant to me. It's, this happened, you were the leaders in charge. You're the temple presidents, you're the vice presidents, you're the governing body commission, you're the sannyasis, you're the gurus. You are 100% responsible for what happened to me. My father, Jagadatma, is 100% responsible. He loved being on the inside, and being important. He's never been important. And it was his little side hustle of being important. Gandharvika has informed me, unless Victoria Police charge him, he's going to be allowed back into ISKCON and to be around children again. So he'll be able to go to the Manchester Temple and into, you know, Sri Radha London Ishvara, and all the ISKCON temples in Britain. So Jagadatma, unless Victoria Police are going to charge him, is now going to be allowed back into ISKCON. They have lost all the previous testimony made by my siblings from 18 years ago, where he was banned from all Australian ISKCON temples. All those testimonies are now disappeared. Anutam has claimed that his computer got destroyed, and all those reports are missing. And they can't, my siblings have had enough of ISKCON lies and deception, and they're like, why bother? The answer is no. We're not dealing with child protection. We already did that, and he was already banned from ISKCON for multiple rapes of children. And now Gandharvika is saying, without a police charge, he is now allowed to come back into ISKCON and rape children in Manchester and in London at the temple. And he is going to be welcomed back with open arms despite raping multiple children, because Victoria Police are not charging him. My siblings hopefully will come forward. I'm yet to see them come forward to Victoria Police and testify. I'm yet to see them testify to Child Protection Office. They don't want, like, I've been assured they will. And then I think it's just so traumatizing for them. That's their choice. But it does really hurt me that he could go on to rape more children in England at the temples, and there's nothing I can do about it other than speak out publicly that I'm not the only child he raped. My siblings don't want to, and they talk to other Hare Krishnas. They don't want to ever speak to another Hare Krishna again. And obviously Hare Krishnas are messaging them. You know, I have, I don't know, 50 plus random people calling me, you know, all hours of the night, you know, without even checking. I'm like, no, block. My siblings don't want that notoriety, the risk of slander. I'm prepared to take it on because I've got the financial means. I can jump on a plane and go to India and testify against Lokanath. And I'm not afraid to do that. I've already copped a beating in my childhood and, you know, threatened to kill me and kill Gaura Govinda Maharaj. Like, I'm like, no, I'm good. You would, you know, I'm fine, but I can't ask others to be in that position. So at this point in time, Bhavananda's here in Australia to answer, you know, I'm assuming cover up how to get away with 40 plus years of child molestation and rape. And ISKCON is going to game plan how to cover it up, get away with it, put out a, you know, beautiful statement by Anuttama, you know, that we're very sorry, you know, but there's no concrete proof that Bhavananda raped children, despite multiple testimonies by multiple children that he has, where, you know, one of the children committed suicide after burning his house down when I was a child. And all the devotees knew about this, all of them. It's never been a secret that Bhavananda raped this boy and burnt the house down. It was common knowledge when I was a child. But we're going to see Bhavananda trotted out as a wonderful devotee, as Ambarish said, instrumental in getting the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium over the line, and couldn't have done it without Bhavananda and Satadanya, were his words, that they have fallen, but that temple was impossible without Bhavananda at the head as the creative director. And the fact that I expressly told Ambarish that I did not want Bhavananda to have anything to do with the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium, and that he had raped me as a child multiple times. So I did tell Ambarish about this when I was 10 years old in 1994 in Mayapur. And he was very kind, you know, very supportive, very professional. He had a, you know, handler and a secretary and a bodyguard, and, you know, he was always very kind. But ultimately ISKCON has let me down by my 18 years in ISKCON.
And I'm very keen in part two, when we record that, to talk about what's happening now in terms of your relationship with ISKCON and the work that you're doing to campaign, to speak out. Unfortunately, so just so everyone's aware, we're recording this because Australia big time difference. I'm recording this early in the morning UK time, and I have to as a relative term to go to work. But
Very
I've loved the fact that we've recorded almost a 2 hour podcast. It's been almost, I know it's been almost 2 hours.
cut.
No, we're not gonna cut anything out. And everything that you've said is gonna get published because it's really important to
Oh,
be open and transparent. But uh we're gonna record a part two, and we're gonna talk about more about what's happening now and what needs to happen in the future. Because everyone needs to learn from the past. So I'm going to say goodbye to everyone at home, and you and I can have a very quick debrief, and then I'll jump in the car, stick to the speed limit, and get to where I need to be. So Palika, we're very grateful to you for being the guest on this week's edition of the Hare Krishnas in Britain podcast. And I was very open with Palika before we started broadcasting that I wanted her to say anything that she wanted and that she felt comfortable with. And the Hare Krishna project, the Hare Krishnas in Britain podcast, is a space for devotees to share pretty much anything that they want. It's a safe space, and it's so important to be open and transparent about these issues. So very grateful to Palika. I'm pronouncing it correct, aren't I? Palika. I've written it down. I've written how you phonetic on my piece of paper. So until I'll have a quick chat with Palika before I rush off. But thank you to everyone for watching this podcast, episode number 60. And please do comment and send some feedback. We love to hear from you. And if you want to reach out to Palika, so privately, I can ensure you get her contact details. And there's certainly other people around the Krishna consciousness movement and outside the movement who are there to help and to listen and to support and to guide. So until next week, we'll see you all soon. Thank you. Hare Krishna.